Hello, and welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching my videos as I explore the wide world of pens. This is number 2 in my Osprey series. Hopefully by the end I'll be able to say that without hesitation. Certain things just tie up the tongue. So this video we're going to explore an option that you have with the Osprey. They very nicely sent me this gold-plated clip, and when I first saw this in the package I said, what's that for? And I read the letter and it said you can easily swap it out. So I looked at the pen and there is a seam there. It's very subtle. You can kind of feel it a little bit with your thumbnail, but what's nice in the classic dual fold design, that top finial just unscrews. The threads are nice, like all the threads and all the pieces fit together so nicely in all the Milano bits. So we're going to take the chrome-plated Silvertone clip and replace it with this Goldtone clip. And we'll see there's a little notch there that the clip fits into, so that way when you tighten down on the cap finial, it stays in place. And the finial tightens down, and we have now a gold clip. Interesting how that changes the look. And I found all these clips to be nice and springy, very, very functional. But now we have a little bit of a mismatch. I still have that medium chrome-plated or silver tone nib, so we're going to swap it out as we've done before. Yes, there's ink in the pen. For these 2 units, very well labeled, so we're going to have a fine and an extra fine. They're stainless steel nibs, but they're gold-plated. And as we saw in the other chrome-plated nibs that I had that matched that chrome-plated clip, is they come in these nib assemblies, so it makes it very easy to swap them in and out. And a nice gold plating. All the nibs are identified as to what nib it is. So we'll take a look at that tipping material, and there's definitely a difference between the extra fine here on the left and the fine here on the right. That same nice feed that they've had on all the other nibs. So I think we're going to swap in the extra fine. Look how that changes it aesthetically. And write with my Navajo turquoise ink that I've had the pen filled up with since the beginning. So here we have the Osprey in the Goldtone series. And all of the nibs are nice and springy, very functional. Large gap there to fit over something thick. And when we take off the cap, we'll see a Goldtone nib. So now we have a Goldtone version of this very nice Milano pen. I know what I like, and this is certainly a different look than the chrome-plated or Silvertone version. Let's see how that extra fine Goldtone nib writes. Well, this is almost as good as the extra fine nib that I wrote with earlier. It's a slight touch more feedback. It's still pleasant, and I would still call it smooth. And this extra fine line, I think, is almost finer than the extra fine, but when I'm done with all these videos, I'll do a full comparison. And it lays down a decent amount of ink. So if I was going to rate this nib, something new that will start with this series, I would give it an 8.5. As an extra fine, it's good. As I mentioned, not as smooth as the extra fine, but it almost seems to put down a finer line. And that's part of the challenges with nibs, is you get variations amongst nibs, no matter how well the quality of the nib manufacturers may be. So I think we need to take a look at the next nib in the series. Oh, and yes, I get ink on my fingers. I just can't avoid it. This is also a very nice nib. Again, more feedback than the chrome-plated or Silvertone versions of similar nibs that I had from Osprey. I really like that simplistic design of the nib. You know, it gives you the information you need, the brand and the size of the nib. It's definitely a little bit wider line than the extra fine. So I was to rate this nib, I'd give it an 8.6. My personal preference, because it lays down a little bit more ink than the extra fine did, and that's my preference. It feels good on the paper. It writes effortlessly, which to me is also another great trait in a nib. So this is the 5th nib now that I've looked at from Osprey, and I haven't found a dud in a bunch. In fact, they're all exceptional. Very nice, very well made. Well, I have a confession to make. I got a lot of ink on my fingers when I was changing out the nibs on the Osprey pens, and it was because I didn't recognize that Osprey's done something a little different in how their converter and nib assemblies fit together. You know, here's a Bach nib assembly. Yes, it's a black number 5 nib. But that little extension fits into that groove and connects to the little nipple at the end of the nib assembly. Here's a Jinhao version of that same concept. And of course, Jowo also has that same concept. They just don't have that little valley extension, whatever, that would even be more secure with the converter. But Osprey's done something a little different. This is a nib unit that you could order from them when you order a second nib, and it just screws in and out of the various models. But if you look at, there's some spare converters that they sent me. If you look at that opening, it's very, very wide. If you look at this nib assembly, which looks similar to what we saw on Bach and Jowo, that doesn't fit. there's no correlation between that. What is interesting is if you take a converter from one of these, it does fit well. So a lot of ink sits at the end of that converter that's loose. You know, it flows well to that nib and feed, but when you're going to be changing nibs, it's best to keep this vertical, you know, and draw down the converter to pull down any extra ink that's sitting there. And then you could wear gloves to keep even more ink off your fingers, but I just use a paper towel. Unscrew that nib assembly, keeping this vertical. And then what I usually do is just put this in a glass of water to let it soak, grab another nib assembly, put it back in place, keeping it vertical, and you'll minimize ink spills. And then once I've done that, I put it into the bottle of ink, I go down, I go up, I make certain everything's saturated before I write with it. And I'll also maybe let it set for a minute or two to let everything equilibrate. But that's the changing of nibs, Osprey style. A viewer had mentioned that they were able to put their Bach number 6 nib assembly and replace their Zebra G nib assembly with a Bach. And I would say that that doesn't work because the threading is different. The threading on the Bach is a finer thread than the Osprey uses on their two, and I just put this standard number 6 Osprey nib assembly here just to show those differences. The diameter is very, very close to just a hair under 8 millimeters, so it fits in that way, but those threads don't match up. So the Osprey has a unique nib assembly with those threads, which is what I suspected. So generally, I do prefer a Goldtone color, but I have to admit that the way that chrome-plated clip works with this color, I prefer the Silvertone, but it's really just a personal taste. I know some people don't like Goldtone, some people don't like Silvertone, so you have to decide what you like, but whatever you like, you can get the nib of your choice, your style, to complement, to trim on your pen. Here are the 5 Osprey stainless steel nibs that I've reviewed so far in the 2 videos. The extra fine, the CP stands for chrome plate. The Silvertone version, GP, is gold plate, the Goldtone version. So the extra fine, the fine, the medium, and the stub broad. The medium is definitely medium. The extra fine, I think, could be a little finer relative to the extra fine nib. And the fine nib is certainly in between these two. All of these nibs lay down a nice, generous portion of ink, which is something that I enjoy and like. So that's the comparisons of the nibs. I have a space here for the regular broad nib, and then when we get to the flexi nibs, they'll be down below. So we have one sheet to compare all the nibs using Noodler's Navajo Turquoise ink. Well, we've come to the conclusion of the second video in my Osprey series. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this look. I'm certainly enjoying writing with these pens, this pen and these nibs. Hope this video finds all of you safe, healthy, and happy. Hopefully you're enjoying putting ink on paper, writing, doodling, journaling, scribbling, sketching. Whatever you'd like to do, it goes better with ink on paper. We've reached the end of this video. There will be many more in this series, so stay tuned. We're going to say bye until the next video. Nice ink and pen nib combo.